Greetings all, Bruno Lewis here with JLB Productions. Thanks for joining us for this video. This is part 3 of our DI box series. In part 1, as you remember, we learned what a DI box does and when you need one. In part 2, we learned about the difference between active and passive DI boxes. In this video, we're going to look at amplifier DIs. What do they do? How do I use one? What are the advantages and disadvantages of amplifier DIs compared to normal DI boxes? And do I still need an external DI box? Now in front of you on the table, you can see a couple of amplifiers. The amplifier on the left is a Vox AGA70. It's one of their acoustic guitar amplifiers. And the amplifier on the right is a Hartke A25 bass amplifier. Neither of these is a large or expensive amplifier. However, technology has advanced to the point that many amplifiers, even entry-level amplifiers, are coming equipped with DI outs. As you can see on the back of both of these amplifiers, you have an XLR output. On the Vox, it is called a DI out. On the Hartke, it is labeled direct out. They are also called balanced out, or in certain cases, balanced line out. So let's begin by answering the question, what do these amplifier DIs do? They are essentially a DI box which is built into the back of an amplifier. In other words, they perform the dual function of line balancing and impedance matching, converting the high impedance unbalanced output of a guitar, bass or keyboard into a balanced low impedance signal that can be run long distances without suffering from degradation due to hum or buzz. Secondly, they allow the direct connection of your instrument to a mixing console or professional recorder without the use of a microphone. So the second question we're going to address today is, how do I use one of these amplifier DIs? How do I connect it to my mixing console? The first thing is you will need an ordinary microphone cable, and you would connect the female end of your microphone cable to the XLR output on your amplifier. It is best to do this with the equipment powered down. At the very least, make sure that the gain on your mixing console is down all the way, or the channel is muted before you do this. It's also a very good idea to make sure you switch phantom power on that channel off. The amplifier DI does not need phantom power, and in the case of certain older designs, phantom power can actually harm the output. In order to find out if yours is one of these, consult with the manufacturer. The second step is to take the male end of the microphone cable and connect it to an XLR input on your mixing console. Now, on certain mixing consoles, you will find that running directly into the XLR or microphone input will actually overload the preamp. And the reason is that some amplifier outputs are very hot, very high in level, and even with the gain all the way down, you will find that you still have too much signal. If you find this to be the case, I recommend using one of these adapters. This is referred to as an XLR to TRS or tip ring sleeve adapter, and all it does is it converts the XLR connector to a balanced 1/4 inch connector. So you retain the balanced line level signal, you just have a different connector. What this does is it clips on to the front of your mic connector, the front of your XLR connector, and it allows you to run directly into the 1/4 inch line level on your mixing console. This will often result in a better sound simply because you are bypassing the microphone preamp, which in certain mixers has a certain color to it. I'll demonstrate both of these setups just so that you can see the difference in level. Now the next step in our process is to connect your instrument to the amplifier. once again, make sure that you keep the mixer channel turned all the way down during this process. It's simply to avoid transients, in other words, loud bangs and pops going through the PA system. So I'm going to connect, as those of you who are familiar with the AGA70 will know that it has a tube channel and a normal or clean channel. I'm going to connect my Takamine TSF48 to that channel, so make sure that my master is turned down, and plug into my guitar. There's the TSF48, just in case you're wondering. So plug in there. Just wait for the tube preamp to warm up. The settings I'm going to use on my guitar, I'm going to leave the EQ set completely flat and the cool tube knob turned completely off. Now that you've completed the connection of guitar or whatever the instrument is to your amplifier, the next step is to get sound from your amplifier. The reason for this is that some amplifier DIs are positioned after the master volume. So if there's no sound coming out of the amplifier, there will be no sound going to the DI. So as you can see here, on the AGA70, the channel that's closer to the camera is the normal or non-tube channel, and I've connected my guitar to that. My volume on the channel is set to about 10 o'clock. My EQ is completely flat. My color is positioned at 12 o'clock. My reverb is all the way down. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play my guitar and raise the master volume. Okay, so now we have sound coming out of the amplifier. As you can see, the clip light on the channel came on, so I decided to just back my channel volume down a little bit and raise my master volume to compensate. Alright, we'll now turn our attention to the mixer itself. As you can see, we are connected to channel 3 on my Mackie 1202 VLZ Pro. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to perform the gain setting procedure on the mixer itself. So on the channel that I'm plugged into, I press my solo or PFL button. As you can see, the rude solo light flashes to tell me I'm in gain setting mode. And I'll now play my guitar and raise the gain or trim level. It's usually safest to start with this around 10 o'clock in case you have excessive level. Now, as you can see there, even with the gain fairly low, I'm already over the optimum level setting, so I'm going to back my gain down to about 9 o'clock. It's important to get a realistic idea of how loud your instrument's going to be during performance, so I normally try and get the player to play some loud chords. Again, we're still a little bit loud there. Back down. Alright, so you can see that running directly into the XLR or microphone input, we need a relatively low gain setting. Otherwise, we risk overloading the input to the mixer. Let me now show you how this sounds if I connect to the line input using my adapter. So I'm going to release my solo switch there and connect my adapter in line. Remember, all this does is it simply converts the connector type. Plug back in, press solo, my rude solo light flashes. Let's see what our level is now. As you can see there, our level is now a lot more manageable. So let's raise our gain. So running into the line level, you can see that we have a much more normal gain. In other words, somewhere around 11 o'clock, which is what you would expect for line level sources. So bear this in mind, especially if you have a mixing console which tends to distort easily, and especially if you're finding that your gain is all the way down, but you're still having trouble getting your level around zero when you're setting gain. So there we have a summary of how to set up amplifier DIs. As you can see, it's a very straightforward process. All you do is you connect the XLR output on the amplifier to the XLR or line level input on your mixer. Make sure that there's sound coming out of your amplifier and then perform the gain setting procedure on your mixing console. Whether you run into the microphone or line input will depend on your mixer, whether the mic input has a sufficient gain range to handle the signal that's coming from the amplifier, and also what sounds better. Next, let's have a look at the advantages and disadvantages of amplifier DIs compared to a standalone DI box. First of all, they save you money. Because they're built into the amplifier, you already have a DI available and you don't need to spend money on an additional DI box. This can mean a significant amount of savings. In many cases, you can actually buy an entire amplifier for the cost of a high quality external DI box. The second thing is that they simplify setup. As you can see, setup is extremely simple and straightforward. All you need is a single XLR or microphone cable. In order to run an external DI box, you would need the DI box itself and an additional instrument cable to connect the through connector of the DI box to the amplifier itself. So they not only save you expense, they also save you time and complexity during setup. More cables inevitably means more things that can go wrong, more things to transport, more things to look after, and stop being pinched at the gig. So there are advantages compared to an external DI box. Now let's discuss the disadvantages of amplifier DIs. The first disadvantage, as we can see, is that they can sometimes overload the inputs of certain mixing consoles. This is especially true of many cheaper or entry-level mixing consoles, a good example being the Yamaha MG series. With those, if I were to connect this DI, even with the gain turned all the way down, I would still have issues with overloading and hence issues with distortion. Now, in certain cases, you can work around this issue, as you can see, by using an XLR to TRS adapter and running into the line level of the mixing console. Unfortunately, in the real world, this is often either not possible because of reasons of time or because the technician who you're working with doesn't know the difference between a line level input and a mic level input. All he knows is that he's getting distortion and he's unable to deal with this really hot signal that you're sending him. So if you operate in a real world situation, it's often best to carry an external DI box just for these contingencies. The second disadvantage of amplifier DIs is that because they are often added as an afterthought, they can in many cases be much worse sounding than good quality external DI boxes. Now, in order to show you this, I'm going to do two comparisons. I'm going to first play my TSF-48C through my mixer using the amplifier DI. I will then connect to my Radial JDI and let you hear how that sounds. Just to let you know, I'm running directly into my mixing console, as you can see here. The gain is set to 10 o'clock, channel EQ is set flat, and the output of the mixer is connected directly to the video camera. let's do the same demonstration using the Hartke A25. As you can see there, the direct out is connected directly to the XLR input on channel 3 of my mixer. It's interesting that the direct out on this amplifier runs at a much lower level than that on the Vox AGA70. It's much closer to microphone level, and therefore you can see that my gain on the mixer is set quite a bit higher. It's set at about 230, nearly 3 o'clock. This is in order to get correct gain structure throughout the system. So that's our demonstration of the amplifier DIs versus the standalone DIs. Could you hear much of a difference? In my opinion, when comparing the Vox amplifier DI to the Radial JDI, I found the sound from the JDI to be a little bit warmer and a little bit rounder than the sound from the amplifier DI. Both were very usable. Neither one was noisy or unduly harsh or sharp. When it comes to the Hartke A25 DI versus the BSS DI, I found the sound from the BSS DI to be more detailed and having more in the way of high frequencies than the direct out on the Hartke A25. Again, both signals were perfectly usable, although I think I prefer the signal from the BSS DI box a little bit more. So there you can see the differences between amplifier DIs and external standalone DI boxes. Very often, the quality that you get from a built-in DI in an amplifier is perfectly adequate and perfectly usable, especially for live sound, where very often the determining factor in the quality of sound perceived by the audience is the loudspeakers in the system rather than the inputs to the system itself. However, when it comes to recording, you may wish to choose an external DI box just to give you that little bit extra bit of quality that will make your recording shine and the tracking process to be that much smoother and easier. A final disadvantage of amplifier DIs is the feature set that you get. Very often on inexpensive or low-cost amplifiers, all you'll get is a single XLR output. If you compare that to the features that are available on the JDI, you can see that the JDI has a number of things that could be very helpful in solving problems in a sound reinforcement situation. To begin with, you have a polarity reverse switch. This can be often useful in dealing with acoustic instruments that insist on feeding back. This is because you as the player are standing at what is called a room mode, a place in the room which is particularly resonant at a certain frequency, and hence your guitar is feeding back at that frequency. Very often, flipping the polarity can completely solve this problem, or at least help to alleviate it to the point where the gig can happen. No such feature is available on the A25 or on the AGA70 for that matter. Secondly, on the JDI you have a ground lift switch. This will enable you often to deal with ground loops, cases where your stage equipment is on one main circuit and your mixing console is on another. If there is a difference in ground potential between these two circuits, it will show up as hum or buzz. Very often, lifting the ground at the DI will break the ground connection between these two circuits and stop the ground loop. No such feature is available on either of the amplifier DIs that we are looking at today. Now, to conclude this video, I'd like to mention a little bit about block diagrams. It's very important as a sound engineer that you be aware of where in the signal chain your DI signal is coming from. This is especially true with amplifier DIs because you don't know if the signal that you are getting is pre or post EQ and whether it is pre or post master volume. So let's have a look at the block diagram for the Vox AGA70. Now, as you know, the Vox AGA70 has two channels. It has a solid state channel, and as you can see here, it has a tube preamp. What is also very interesting is that both the DI and tuner out are located before this tube in the signal chain. What that means is that you will not get any of the coloration from the tube preamp in your signal. So some people may buy this amplifier thinking that, oh great, I have a tube DI box. Unfortunately, that's not the case. The second thing to note is that in this case, the DI out is pre all of your EQ controls as well as pre your anti-feedback and master controls. So what this means is that all of the changes that you make to your tone controls will not be reflected in the direct output. This is often the preferred setup for sound engineers because it means that whatever changes the player makes to their EQ on stage will not be affected, or rather will not affect your front of house send. This is good in the sense that you don't want the tone of the guitar to be changing halfway through the gig. However, for musicians, it means that you cannot affect the DI out with your onboard EQ and tone controls. So if you are purchasing this hoping that you'll get a complete recording solution where you can make changes on the amplifier and they will be reflected in the DI out, unfortunately, that's not the case. So being able to read a block diagram and to interpret where your signal is in the signal chain is an important skill both for the sound engineer as well as the working musician. Now, if we have a look at the Hartke amplifier manual, as you can see here, this is the A-series combo owner's manual, you'll notice that at the back there is a specifications page, but there is no block diagram. And this is something which I feel manufacturers should really address, because having a block diagram is very useful in terms of determining where your signal is actually coming from. So if you don't have a block diagram, then you will need to consult the section of the manual that discusses the direct out. In this particular manual, that is located on page 6, and as you can see here, under the direct out signal, it says the standard balance XLR connector provides a line level pre-EQ and pre-volume output signal. So once again, the EQ changes that you make on the amplifier are not reflected in the direct out signal. The other thing is that it says it is line level, but in my experience it is actually more like a mic level signal, meaning that you need a gain of about 2 to 3 o'clock on most mixers to make this happen. So if you roll up to a gig and you tell the sound engineer, yeah, my DI is line level out, and he sets his gain accordingly, he may get nothing or next to nothing and think that there's something wrong with your amplifier. So always test your gear before you bring it out and use it in the real world. So that's all we have for this video. I hope it's been helpful for you. If you have any questions or comments, do please get in touch either in the comment section below, through a private message on YouTube, or on my Facebook page, GLB Productions. Until the next video, this is Bruno Luce with GLB Productions. Thanks for watching and take care.